Awesome. Thanks for coming, guys. Today we have a workshop with Richard from Chainlinkk Labs, and is going to be discussing a little walkthrough with Chainlink Functions. And Yeah, let's get started with it. Um, Before we start, however, I want to give a little thanks to our sponsors, SCC Bahrain and Avalanche, especially for making this hackathon happen, and for creating Intersect the network. The next thing I want to mention to you guys is we have a bunch of social media channels that you guys can follow. So you can follow us on our Twitter and our LinkedIn for announcements and important news. You can contact us on our Telegram channels and contact the DevRels from the various protocols if you have any technical questions. If you want to sign up for the hackathon and you haven't done that already, you can do that on the Dora Hacks. And keep an eye on the YouTube page for workshops and ceremonies. This whole workshop will be recorded and posted on the YouTube channel as well. So keep an eye out for that if you want to watch it again. Lastly, I want to answer some of your questions. So last time we got some feedback that you guys didn't have Intersect tokens to start building. Well, I want to say that the network is now live, at least the testnet, so you guys can start building already. And if you guys want any tokens, just ping us in the Telegram group chat your address, and we'll airdrop them to you. So I think with that, we can get started. Richard, I'm passing it on to you now.
Perfect. Sorry, one question. You mentioned there might be chats. Where will I see that? Is it on YouTube?
No, so it'll be the people who are joining here that aren't see here. So we have some people in the waiting room.
Okay.
So they'll ask here, but I think it'll be distracting if you're doing that. So I can just keep an eye out on the YouTube and the Twitter. If there are any questions there, I'll just compile them, and towards the end we can just answer them all, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. We can do that too. I always like to, I don't
Cool.
know, I like to have questions while I'm going along, but we can wait till the end too.
Okay,
Um,
perfect.
yeah, sure. So y'all here for hackathon. You want to hear more about Chainlink functions, I think is what we're talking about today. I will give a brief overview of Chainlink just in general, what it is real quick. I won't bore you with a slideshow, but I will ask, we won't be interactive, so I'm going to ask you to play along at home. It's like a magician on TV back in the day, if you remember those. We have some questions, talk about what Chainlink is, why Chainlink is important, go through a demo with Chainlink functions, and yeah, that'll be a wrap. I'll answer any questions you have along the way. So starting out, thinking about blockchains, you're here in a blockchain hackathon. I'm assuming that means that you think blockchains are awesome. I think blockchains are awesome. I think they have like all these superpowers of like decentralization, a trustless environment where you rely on smart contracts, where you have cryptographic guarantees of things instead of relying just on trust. And that's great. But they also kind of remind me of one of my favorite Disney movies. Does anybody remember the movie Aladdin, where you had Genie, where he talks about how he has this phenomenal cosmic power, right? That's blockchains. He also has this itty bitty living space of his lamp. This is also blockchains. Blockchains don't talk to anything outside of themselves very well, right? You need things that are deterministic. What do I mean by deterministic? If I were to ask you, and so I normally would ask for participation, it's a hard question coming up. Prepare yourselves. Put on your big math brains here. What is 1 plus 1? It's not a trick question. I'm not trying to do some sort of like, JavaScript adds like extra numbers when you add numbers together. Just simple 1 plus 1. It's 2, right? Cool. We all agree. If we were a blockchain here, we'd all agree. We come to consensus. That deterministic question, 1 plus 1, gives us 2. Easy peasy. If I were to ask you something a little bit more complicated, like what is the current temperature outside? Like I'm here in Texas. Currently, it's only 79 degrees. It's a high of like over 100 in Fahrenheit today. Where you are, it's probably different. We're going to have a hard time reaching consensus on this as our blockchain, right? We're all different nodes in the blockchain trying to reach consensus. I say it's 79. You may say it's something in Celsius, which I don't even speak because, I'm a dumb American. And that's going to give us a problem reaching consensus. Non-deterministic question. So how do blockchains bring real world data like temperature into the blockchain? This problem of bringing outside data on chain is referred to as the Oracle problem. And that's what Chainlink is. It's a distributed Oracle network, or DON. And so we have a bunch of different products. Let me share my screen real quick, and we'll just talk real briefly about the different products we have before we get going. So if you go to chain.link, sorry, let me move stuff off my screen so I can see. If we go to chain.link and products, we have a few different things. Talk about them super quick here. So we'll start with data. We have data streams and data feeds. Similar-ish in what they provide. They provide you off-chain data, on-chain pricing data, so asset pairs, like something like ETH in the price in terms of USD, stuff like that. The difference is data streams the data to you when you ask for it. So it's like a poll-based method. Say, hey, what is the current price? And it'll stream that data to you. It's more low latency. You get the data when you want it. Data feeds slowly feeds that data on chain when changes happen. So that would be either time-based, or if you have a change in price that's big enough to cause that. We also have proof of reserve. So if you have an asset that is backed by a reserve, proof of reserve is a way to verify that in a distributed manner. We have functions, which we'll talk about. So I'll leave that for now. We have automation. Chainlink automation lets you automate smart contracts. Smart contracts are notoriously lazy, super powerful, extremely lazy. They don't do anything unless you ask them to. Automation lets you automate that either based on log triggers from other smart contracts, events within the blockchain ecosystem, or time-based triggers. We have VRF, which is the verifiable randomness function. It brings truly random numbers into a blockchain environment. Getting random numbers on-chain, also challenging because of that deterministic nature of blockchains. This lets you create them in a distributed and verifiable manner. And then finally, we have CCIP, which lets you communicate between chains. You can send data and or tokens between blockchains. So I guess if you have questions, drop them in and we'll get to them at the end. I don't ask questions now, but hey, we'll get those in the end if you have questions. And anytime through this, if you have questions, we can come back and answer them. So talking about Chainlink Functions today. Functions is probably my favorite of our products, just because of the power that it unlocks. So Chainlink Functions lets you, if you were to go to docs.chain.link, this is our documentation page. You can learn about all the different products here, but if you go to Functions, this is what we'll be spending most of our time kind of going through this information, talking about it. But Chainlink Functions lets you do two very powerful things. The first is it lets you run JavaScript, right? So you can do complex computations. When we're talking about computations on a blockchain, if a problem is a hard problem, like hard computation, if it's complex, it can cost a lot of gas. Chainlink Functions lets you offload that to a separate sandbox environment. You can run that code in JavaScript, get back your answer. Multiple Oracle nodes will run that code, so we can ensure that there's consensus on that answer. You can get back that computation. The other massive thing that having access to those sandboxes and JavaScript does is it lets you call APIs. And to me, that's huge because that completely solves the Oracle problem of having blockchains being isolated from the real world. You have access to anything that's on the internet, right? And so you basically have access to everything, whether that's different pricing data, sports data, weather data, basically anything that you could imagine, some sort of logistics, shipping information. If there's an API for it, you can reach it with Chainlink Functions, bring information from the real world into the blockchain. I think that's super powerful. So if you look at our documentation here, again, I went to docs.chain.link, clicked on functions, and we have an overview. It describes how functions works. And then we have getting started. So there are a few expectations when you're getting started with our stuff. One is that you have like a wallet like MetaMask set up. Two, you're going to have some funds for that wallet. So you'll need the native currency of whatever chain you're on. And you'll also need some Link token. Where do you get that token, Link token? And if you need the regular native currency. If you go to faucets.chain, functions.chain.link. We have a newly redesigned faucet here. A lot of different choices. What's really cool is like, so for this example, we'll be using Sepolia. So we can get actual ETH on Sepolia, and we can also get link tokens on Sepolia. So we'll select those two. We can just click continue. I've already connected my wallet up here. Evidently my wallet's currently on Fuji. So let's go to Sepolia. So we get those two options. Click continue. It'll fill in my wallet address. We can click get tokens. Here you may see some things to like prove that you're human, and you might need to connect your GitHub as well, just depending. So just something to kind of keep an eye out for. For some reason, people love to hoard testnet tokens. I personally don't get it. It's like monopoly money. It has no real value, but hey, people like to hoard things, I guess. So we've got our tokens here. If I check out my wallets, I can see, I've got some Sepolia ETH, and I've got some link tokens as well. So that's what you'll need to get started. So we head back to the documentation. There's a few different things we're going to look at today. We're going to look at Remix to deploy the contract itself. We're going to use the Chainlink Functions playground. It's kind of an in-browser way to test that JavaScript code. And then we're also going to use the function subscription page to actually create a subscription for our functions. That'll make more sense here in just a moment. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this code here. We're going to go to the functions playground. Before we do that, let's talk through this code and see what it's doing. So the first thing we're doing is we're saying we're going to get a character ID, and its value is going to be args0. What is args0? With Chainlink functions, you can pass in arguments, args, and you can pass them in as an array. This is the first item in that array. Then we're going to have our API response. So in this example, we're hitting a Star Wars API and getting information on the characters. So we'll pass in, a value for the character ID, get that character back. If there's an error, we throw the error. Otherwise, we take our API response. We use functions to encode it as a string, and we're returning back the data.name. So we copy this and we go to our functions playground here. It's going to be at functions.chain.link/playground. I think it's already filled in, but I'm just going to get rid of this and paste it in again. Yes, it was the same thing. So we've got our code here. We have our argument here of 1. So this is going to be that character ID. You can also pass in secrets. So if you have like an API key that you need to pass in, you can pass that in as well. If you click run code here, you'll see our output is Luke Skywalker. If we were to change the character ID to 2 and run our code again, we get C3PO. Where is this coming from, right? So if we say console.log data and run the code again, whoops, typing's hard. I think that worked. Will that work? Nope, it won't work. My JSON foo is weak. What is it? Is it JSON.stringify data? Is that what I want? That's what I want. So we're just logging that JSON data out. So you can see we have a ton of stuff here for C3PO. We have his name, his height, his mass, his hair color, his skin, yada, 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 all this information about it. So if we wanted different information from this API, we could get that as well. We'll go back to Luke Skywalker, and we can see here in our console log, we get different information. So that's pretty cool. This, again, we're just using Star Wars here for this example, but you could hit a weather API, you could hit sports data, whatever you wanted. Anything on the internet, you can access. So that's pretty cool. All right, we'll head back to the documentation. So we talked about what this does. We've got our arguments. We've got the first name and the Star Wars characters. We went ahead and ran it. So now we can go to Remix. So we'll open in Remix this same code. And I know it's shocking, Remix does have a light mode. I'm on team light mode. I'm sorry, y'all, if that hurts your eyes. So inside here, we've got our example. Just close a couple things, clean things up. Let's talk through this example real quick. So I'm sure y'all are already familiar. You've got your license, you've got your compiler version. Solidity is a compiled language. So that means that, it looks nice and human readable in this form. It gets compiled down to bytecode before it gets deployed on the blockchain. We import a few Chainlink contracts here for functions. So we've got the functions clients, a version of ownership here in confirmed owner, and then functions request. In our contract, we have the fact that we're using functions request. We've got a few variables that we set up here. So the latest request ID. So the way that functions works is you will go from your computer or your smart contract. You'll make that request, right? So your smart contract says, hey, functions router contract. I'd like this to be done. That then goes to the Oracle network. The Oracle nodes within that will run your code. When they get their answers back, they will then come to consensus on their answers, and then they will pass that information back to your contract. A few things to note there. So we do have multiple Oracle nodes that are going to be running this JavaScript code. It's great when it comes to reading data off the blockchain, right? We want to make sure that we're getting consensus. We want to make sure it's distributed, trust minimized, trustless, all those things. That's great, right? So we have multiple nodes that will get this information back from the Star Wars API and say, hey, yes, character 1 is Luke Skywalker. How do they reach consensus? We talked about, in our example of non-deterministic data, something like the temperature, right? Temperature where you are in the world. I mean, maybe it makes sense for like a global average temperature, but I like to talk about this more in like the sense of my house. Different rooms in my house could be slightly different temperatures, right? A degree or two off here and there. If I were to ask you the question, what's the temperature in my house? And I have 5 sensors in my house, each one's going to give me a different answer. Hard to reach consensus. If I said, given these 5 temperatures, what's the median temperature? Now this is a deterministic question, right? You've taken non-deterministic, what's the temperature of my house, turned it into deterministic. Given these 5 temperatures, what's the median? It's the same way that we kind of approach it here. So given the responses from the Oracle nodes, from the API, what's the median value? Median works really well when everybody answers the same. It can be kind of strange if you do something like in the past, I've asked ChatGPT, or I guess OpenAI's API, for a random name. And if you get the median value of a list of random names, it's going to be a random name. It's kind of strange that it's the median value, right? Because like if I give 5 names back and I say, what's the middle one? It's just going to be the middle random name, but it still achieves the same thing, right? You get a random name and, in a distributed trustless fashion. When it comes to having multiple Oracle nodes making API requests and you're doing not a get or a fetch, but you're doing a put or a push, like you're putting information into the API, that's just something to think about because you will have multiple API interactions when you're putting information into the API. So if you create the API, if you're in control of it and you can accommodate that, that's great. If you're doing something like sending an email with an API, that could lead to issues, right? Because you're going to have each Oracle node say, hey, send this email, send this email, send this email. So just something to think about when you're designing your smart contracts and your whole application overall. Okay, so we talked about how functions works. We have some variables here. So our request ID, our response, and our error, right? So we make that request, we get back a request ID, we wait for functions to do its thing, make the API call, come to consensus, put that information back on chain. That's when we get our response or error, something went wrong. We have some events here for the response. We have our router. So in the example, this is hard-coded for Sepolia. Each different network is going to have a different address, possibly for the router. If you go here to the documentation for supported networks, you can see all the different networks. You can see the router address, other information for the Don ID and the secrets. We won't be touching on that, but that's more for when you are uploading secrets and stuff like that into the router. So those will be specific to the different chains that you're on. Then we have our JavaScript source. This is hard coded into the contracts. This one's formatted really nicely. I will say, when you have source like this, it's hard coded into your contract. Just a couple gotchas, things to be aware of. You'll notice every single piece of code here has a semicolon after it. So semicolons are 100% required when we're doing this, just so that it can keep track of formatting, and it knows where the different pieces of code end. The other thing is, each one of these lines in this example is surrounded in double quotes. That's so that you can make it look nice, right? So it's fairly well formatted here. You can see what's going on. The other option is in your functions playground, for example. Where did the functions playground go? Here it is. You can take your code here, do your testing, get everything you need, and then you can collapse everything down to one line, right? So you could take this and put it in here all on one line and just put a quote around both ends, but you need to make sure you have those semicolons in there. I think if you look, yeah, I didn't put a semicolon at the end of this line. That would cause big problems in there if we didn't have this. So just something to be aware of. You need your semicolons. You need to make sure that you have everything protected with like single quotes, double quotes. Another thing to remember, I'm just trying to give you all like the little things that catch me up, because these are like the little things that seem so simple when you say them, but you know, like a missing semicolon can like ruin your day because you're trying, where is it? The other thing is here, for example, we have throw error and we have quote request failed. You notice that's a double quote. If you go back to remix, you'll notice we have single quotes here because we have a double quote here, right? You don't want to like close your double quote here. So be aware of like which protection you're using for this string. But yeah, you can put it all on one line if you want. Somebody's saying that semicolons is giving them flashbacks to C++. Putting everything on one line gives me flashbacks to like ye olden internet web 1 days, where you would literally take your page, it was all coded in HTML, and you would put it all on one line before you FTP'd it up to the server, because new lines are characters, and we're talking about dial-up speeds. New line characters take time to download, so you would want to get rid of those. So yeah, just a couple little things. So we've got our source here. It's the same source that we went through earlier, about the Star Wars API, getting that character, all that information. We have our gas limit. Let's call back gas limits. What this is it's the maximum amount of gas that the Oracle node is allowed, like the router contract is allowed to use when it calls back into your contract. So we'll see here in a minute, there's going to be two functions. One's going to be to make the request, and the other one's going to be when the request comes back. So this is the maximum amount of gas that you can use for that callback in. So it's something to be kind of cognizant of and aware of. You can change this amount in the documentation. You'll have like the maximum amount that you can change it to, but just be aware of that and kind of keep that in mind, because it's something that a lot of people run into with functions. Is, and the same thing like VRF. VRF works the same way. You make a request and it comes back into your contract. You have a function for that callback that's too expensive, and so it can't call it because it's going to cost too much gas. We have the Don ID. This is the distributed Oracle nodes, so like the Don that we're using for Sepolia. We have our character. We have our constructor that, you know, basically just sets up functions client and confirmed owner. And then we have send request. So this is where we're actually making that request to Chainlink Functions. So we can see that, you know, it's going to take in a subscription ID, and the arguments, these arguments that are passed in are the same arguments here that we're using for that character ID. So you can see only owner. We're going to get back the request here. We're going to have our functions request that we're using. So we have our JavaScript source for that we're passing in. So within that functions request, we have our JavaScript that we're passing in. If we have arguments, we set them. And then our request ID is going to be returned from this send request. So we encode our request, we pass along the subscription ID, the gas limit, and the Don ID. And then the send request will return the last request ID. Cool. So run send request goes off to the router, says, hey, functions doing its thing, the Oracle network's doing its thing, makes that request to the API, comes back in. When it comes back in, we have fulfill request. So this is where it's going to come back in, and we're going to do something with that information. So we get back our request ID, our response, and any errors that we have. That's what we're passing into this. If the last request ID is not the request ID that's passed in, so like if we're not doing them one at a time, we'll revert. We'll get our response back, and we'll set that to our latest response. From that, we'll parse out the character and set that in there. So we'll say, hey, the response is actually a string. We'll decode it and set it as the character, and we'll set any errors. And then we'll emit that event. Pretty straightforward. Again, it feels really weird. Sorry, y'all. It feels really weird to not have questions while I'm going. If you have questions, we can definitely come back. Happy to come back to this at the end. All right, so we talked through this code. We need to actually deploy this code, but let's take a look here, make sure I haven't accidentally forgotten anything. Yeah, cool. So we'll compile a contract and deploy it. So we'll come here. We have our compiler tab. Mine has a green check mark because I have autocompile turned on. You can either turn on autocompile or click this lovely button here to compile it. You should have a green check mark. Green means go. It means you're good to go. If you have errors, it'll be highlighting something over here in your contract, letting you know what's going on. We'll go to deploy and run. And again, I'm going to be doing this on Sepolia, but there's lots of different networks you can do this on that we have support for in our documentation under the supported networks. Here, you can see all the different networks that we support for functions. Unfortunately, we have to leave Cancun and go to Sepolia. So we'll go to our injected provider, and then we'll go ahead and click deploy. Click confirm. And we should see our contract is deployed here in a minute. While that is deploying, we'll go ahead and create a subscription. So the way I like to think about subscriptions is you pay for Chainlink functions using the link token. And that link token is stored in a bucket called a subscription. This is kind of like my mental model for this. So you have this bucket, and your subscription needs to know about your deployed contracts so that you can say, hey, subscription, this contract's going to use you. Your contract also needs to know about your subscription. So, hey, contract, this is the subscription you use. So they both need to know each other, then you can use them. So we'll create a subscription first. So we'll go to functions.chain.link, create a subscription. You can put in your email address here. This email address needs to be a valid email address. The purpose of this is that you'll get information about your subscription to your email if something were to happen, like you were running low on funds and stuff like that. I know sometimes people get a bit nervous about providing their email addresses. I will say that any valid email address like test@test.com works. So put your email address in there and you should be good to go. You'll agree to the privacy policy. You'll create your subscription. One thing to note, and I'll show you this in the docs, the first time you go through this, you may see some additional things for confirmation or to confirm. I'll wait till this gets done before I do that. I always hate to leave this page and miss something from MetaMask. So we need to sign a message here for the subscription. Sign that. And the next thing we'll need to do is add some funds. So before we do that, going back to the documentation real quick. So first time you use functions, you'll be prompted to connect your wallet. You'll create your subscription. You'll fill out that information that we filled out. And then here's the first time you'll need to accept the terms of service. So that'll look like a signature that you'll do as well through MetaMask to sign and accept those. And then you'll sign the message. So you may have a couple more steps the very first time that you use functions, but it'll prompt you through them. It's pretty straightforward. Cool. And now we're here to funding our subscription. So basically we've created the bucket. The bucket is empty. We need to put some funds in it. You should get like 25 link from the faucet. I'd say 5 link is probably enough for this example. So we'll add our funds. We'll confirm that. I guess while we wait, instead of just staring at me, staring at the screen, I can tell you all a dad joke. I don't know if you've heard this before from me. It's one of my favorite jokes. Did you know when you were born that you were born with four kidneys? It's a medical fact. It's just as you get older, two of them turn into adult knees. I think I can hear the groaning from here. Yeah. Okay. So we've got comments now, like in the chat. Fantastic. Hey everybody. Okay. So we've added our funds to our bucket, right? We need to let our bucket know about our contract. So we need to let our subscription know about our contract. We'll need to add that consumer address. So we go back to Remix. We've deployed our contract here. And one thing, just like side note about Remix, is they recently added this pin contract thing. It's fantastic. I don't know if anybody's ever like deployed a contract, refreshed Remix, and lost their contract, and you're like, oh, I don't know what the address was. I have to go digging through your wallet to find it. If you pin it, it'll come back. So just something to like tuck away. All right, so we've got this contract here. We'll copy the address of this contract for our getting started thing. We'll head back to our subscription, paste in the consumer address, confirm, and we'll wait again. Trying to think what another good joke to share is. I realized the other day, like normally these are fairly global things. This is not a joke, sorry. If you're expecting a joke, this is not a joke. But I was realizing that like most dad jokes are really just like language jokes. And so sometimes they really don't land in like a global audience where like English is not the first language of everybody because they're like play on words, which makes me sad because dad jokes are terrible, but also amazing. Don't worry, we'll have an opportunity for another dad joke before this is over. All right, so we've created our subscription. We funded our subscription. We let our subscription know about our contract. Now we need to let our contract know about our subscription so that we can use it. So our subscription ID is 3409. Yours will be different. Somebody wants a dad jokes function. I have a video coming out soon on the Chainlink YouTube channel. You should subscribe to it, where I make a dad joke dap. So just saying, there's some terrible ones in there. I don't want to give them all away. So we have our subscription ID here. So we'll need this, the 3409. Yours will be different. We'll head back to our contract. And what we're going to call is send request, right? That's what we talked about. So we need to put in our subscription ID there where it says subscription ID. And then we also need to put in our argument. Should we go for 3 this time and see who number 3 is? So we had Luke, C3PO, and I don't know who it is. Hopefully it's not Jar Jar. So we'll put in 3. It's an array, so we just put 3 right in there. We'll click transact. Why are we having problems? 3409, 3. I've done something wrong. I was telling too many dad jokes. Consumer added. Our consumer is 7D3. Is that your address here? Used to be able to see the address really easily. Yeah, 7D3. It's funded. This is on Sepolia. This is on Sepolia. Okay, we're gonna go to the docs and make sure I didn't skip something silly. Did that, added our consumer, run the example, send request with the args. I mean, I can try just one by itself and see if maybe I typed in my args wrong. Nope, this is gonna fail. It always will fail if it tells you it's gonna fail. But we'll try it anyway. Yeah, it failed. What did we do wrong, chat? We're on Spolia. I'm just going to deploy it again, and we'll try one more time real quick. Okay, we deployed again. We'll copy this address. We'll go back to functions. I think I probably just did something silly and missed something somewhere along the way, y'all. Got link in there. Oh, you know what it is? Is that what it was? It may have been I had a space or something on the 3409. That's probably what it was. It's the little things, y'all. It's the little things. Wait for this to confirm and then we'll go through. Yeah, well, so like I don't know what everybody did this weekend, but I went hiking. I put together like a really awesome playlist for hiking. You know, I had some like the Cranberries. I really liked the music from that show with Charlie Brown. What's it called? Peanuts. A little bit of rap like Eminem. Yeah, I call it my trail mix. You know, Cranberries, Peanuts, Eminem. Anyway, it's bad. What is going on? This is deployed just fine. I know this is like it's hating me today. I don't know why. We did this right. That's definitely right. Wonder if like Sepolia is having issues. Let's rock on over to Fuji real quick and see. Sometimes weird spikes can be weird in the testnets. So we'll deploy this on Fuji. I can't even deploy on Fuji. Is Remix having problems? There we go. Maybe a Remix issue. Sometimes Remix can be weird too. So the same process we had on Sepolia. I'm just trying it on Fuji real quick. I think it may have been a Remix issue though. That's me. Okay. So come here, we'll add our consumer. This is our contract. Copy. We'll paste this in. Cool. Okay. And our subscription ID was 11987. Pop that in here. Something is terribly wrong. What have I done? Oh, pro tip. We did a lot of talking about DON IDs and router addresses, and then we changed our network, and we didn't change those things. So that will be the problem here. So the router address is here. And then the DON ID as well. Right, those two things need to change. Cool. So we'll get rid of this. We'll redeploy this. And that will give you that error as well. the most helpful of helpful error messages. Okay, so we redeployed this. Did we change? Yeah, okay. Add another consumer. Make sure we actually copy the consumer's address. Get our subscription ID. Come back here. Pray to the demo gods that this works, because if it doesn't, it'll be real embarrassing. Consumer added. Transact. There we go. Something was just wrong somewhere in my copying and pasting and talking about dad jokes. Okay, so put in our subscription ID, put in our arguments, and now we'll see here on our function subscription, we have this pending thing. This is our actual functions call, like going off to the Oracle nodes, doing their thing. So you can see here, it's pending, it's max cost. Is this? It won't cost that much in the end. That's just the maximum it could possibly be. Yeah, so it's finished now. We can see two things in the status here. We have our computation and our callback. So the computation, that's going to be the JavaScript that came back. The output, like this is definitely not Luke Skywalker, right? But if we change it to string, you can see, hey, our computation, this is what the value is that came back. And then it called back into our smart contract successfully too. So these are the two areas where you could have a problem, right? If your JavaScript was wrong, something was going on with that could cause computation to fail. Or if your callback into your smart contract had an issue, the most common thing I've seen is that gas limit not being high enough. You can have an issue there, but we are successful here. So we hit that API, right? The Swappy, the Star Wars API. We got our answer back. So our character is Luke Skywalker. I'm really curious who number 3 is. I think it's probably Leia. We'll fill that out. And yeah, if y'all have questions, I see somebody here, Don ID, what's that? Is that the Don from CCIP Don, i.e. group of Chainlink Oracle nodes? Similar concept. So yes, group of Chainlink Oracle nodes. It's basically just saying which group for which network, because the Dons are going to be set up like on each network. There's going to be a distributed Oracle node cluster, basically. There's probably a lot of overlap, but that basically just specifying which network we're on. So the Don ID will be network specific. So like Fuji has one, Avalanche Mainnet has one, Sepolia has one, ETH Mainnet has one, yada, yada. If you go look at the supported networks, you can see here the Don ID. It's a good question though. All right, so we requested number 3. Oh, it was R2D2. I was totally wrong. Wasn't Leia. But yeah, so that's Chainlink Functions. I don't know if y'all have questions, concerns, cries of anxiety, anything like that. Hit me up. I'm pretty sure there's a dad jokes API out there too. I don't know. I mean, it seems like a solid hackathon project, right? Just like on-chain dad jokes. You can reward them. Dad joke NFTs. Yeah, if you have a question too, it's not about functions. I'll give it a go. Hi, what's the enterprise use case for product like Chainlink Functions? Enterprise use cases. I mean, you're saying there's not a dad joke enterprise? So enterprise functions could be things like anything from parametric insurance. That's like insurance for like crop insurance, for example. If you don't get enough rain, you can use automation and Chainlink Functions to check rainfall amounts by whatever time frame you want, week, month, day. If there's not enough rainfall for your crops, your crop insurance kicks in and hey, you get paid out. So you can have that information, off-chain information like weather data brought on chain. You can have things like NFTs that are basketball cards, like like the trading card NFTs that update with real-time stats. Same thing for like baseball, whatever sport you wanted. You could bring those real-time stats on chain through functions, update those NFTs. Like really any sort of NFT update, you could have that happen through functions. What else? I mean, really anything you can think of, the sky's kind of the limit for that, right? Like if you wanted on-chain fantasy football, you can do that. If you want to bring stock information on chain, you can do that. If you wanted to bring, like, what's the word I'm looking for here? Supply chain information, tracking a good as it goes through the entire supply chain, right? Like coffee, for example, you want it to go through the entire chain. And you want like updates to it as it goes through, like as it's scanned, you could update the information in like a little NFT for that bag of coffee and have the full transparent process of that coffee on chain. Yeah. Another question, can you use CCIP with Teleporter to connect the Intersect subnet to a different network completely? With Teleporter. I'm not sure I'm super familiar with that question, like what we're asking there. Maybe ignorance with Teleporter and Intersect, honestly, and I apologize. But I do know CCIP enables you to send those messages and data. So as long as you have access to wherever you're wanting to connect things with CCIP, then yes. Yeah. Fumbling around on that question a little bit, probably just from my own ignorance on the Teleporter Intersect side of things, and apologies. Enterprise use cases for further resources on functions. Are there community links and projects for functions? So when it comes to documentation and information about functions, we do have our, nope, that's not the docs. Where did the docs go? They were up here at the top. We do have our docs as well as the Chainlink Developer Hub at dev.chain.link. So this will have some like use case information as well as some educational stuff in here. So there's kind of some demos and stuff like that as well. This one specifically uses CCIP functions and automation for like a rugby prediction application. So we have code explanation of like how it works and everything like that there. Any other questions?
I think we're done then. If there are no questions in the chat.
Awesome. Well,
Cool,
thanks, y'all.
perfect. I mean, if you guys have any questions later, then you guys can just ping us in the Telegram group. We have someone from Chainlink in there to answer some questions. Richard, is there a way they can reach out to you, maybe?
Yeah, so I am on Twitter. I can't call it X, at the RG Dev. So just like the word RG, like my initials, Dev. Um, and yeah, it's probably the best way. The DMs are open. Surprisingly, they're not too noisy yet with spam. So, if you want to give me a follow there, throw me some questions there. If you have questions, I do my best to answer them. Somebody's asking, recommended from a developer roadmap, like after learning functions. Hit me up on Twitter. If you have Twitter, hopefully you do. And we can talk more about that because it's a hard question to answer without more context. I will go ahead and just shill Patrick Collins. He has this company called Cyphern. They have a like, I don't know what to call it, boot camp type thing that you can go through. They have like a whole learning path basically. It's fantastic. Patrick used to work at Chainlink. Like he's an awesome dude. You probably know who he is if you're in this space because he's like, I don't know, Web3 royalty or something, it feels like when it comes to the education side of things. But yeah, happy to answer that question too offline. And thank y'all. I appreciate y'all being here. Give me
Oh,
some time.
awesome, awesome, great. Fatima is saying something about your dad jokes, Richard.
I can't guarantee prizes, but like if I'm the only one voting on things, you'll definitely get bonus points if it's got some good dad jokes in there.
Love it.
So yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Richard, for this awesome workshop. I feel like I'm not gonna thank you for the dad jokes because I was dying and I didn't really enjoy them that much, I'll be honest. But some people in the chat seem to have enjoyed them, so I don't know.
I
Maybe it's
mean,
just my taste.
you can tell they're a good dad joke when you go, ugh. Like
Yeah,
that's the
I was on, if my microphone was on, I was audibly groaning multiple times during
see,
the
so then they were
workshop.
fantastic dad jokes. Like they're this, top quality. It's like, fancy cheese. It's like the worse it smells, the better it is, evidently. I don't know.
Okay,
Anyway,
perfect then. All right, thank you
thanks.
guys.